Hi guys, it's Aegis here. So today I'm here with another V-Clan collection clan deck profile, which I will be covering Tachikaze today. So this is of course a Raptor kernel deck, another kind of a avatar deck that I own in like previous eras in old formats, which basically, if talking about Tachikaze, my favorite is definitely Raptor kernel. And then for Mega Colony, of course, it's Masabila, which I did a deck profile there as well. So if you haven't checked it out, feel free to go through my channel and find it out. It's basically the video before this. Uh, and as usual, I'm still finding chances to make some good fight videos because it's currently Chinese New Year and I've been completely occupied by work. That's why you didn't see me upload a video on Friday of this week. So yeah, hopefully during Chinese New Year when we have more actual time to like rest and stuff, then I get to meet my friends and we can record some fight videos. But put it aside. Going back to the deck profile, let's go through the deck content first, and then we can also talk about some intrinsic stuff about the deck and such. So starter, as usual, anything you want, nothing too fancy right here. Then, since it is a Raptor kernel deck, I'm running 4 of the Raptor kernel. So his skill is actually very interesting, I have to say. First, is a once per turn Vanguard Circle skill. When this unit attacks, counterblast 1, retire more than uh, one or more, and then you can retire any regards you like. So as long as you want to activate this skill, you need to kill at least one. By retiring whatever units you want, for each one retire you get plus 5k, and as the cost, which is to select one or more regards to retire. If you retire total 5 and your opponent is having a Grade 3 Vanguard, after the battle ends, this unit will stand. So the power buff is continue for the whole turn, so it's not only for the battle, which when you restand this card, he still gains that kind of power to fight again. But it's a once per turn skill, so no matter how well you can rebuild your board in premium or whatever, you can't use it twice unless you write another card, because it's not once per turn bound by name. So yeah, it's not a hard once per turn. So if you can find a way to rewrite this card, then of course that's another story, but usually that's not happening. And the second skill is during your turn, uh, if you have units that basically appears in the battle phase, they all get plus 5k. So as long as you enter battle phase, you kill your own style, keep calling back new units like we always do, those units will get the 5k plus. Compared to before, we have kind of a constant plus 10k to the front row, plus 5k to the front row, or give power to units with gauge. Now you have another way to have the power up, and it doesn't require you to have any equip gauge, because that is helping the deck a lot. Tachikaze a lot, especially when you burn your deck very fast, that you are like at a stage that you can rebuild units, but you don't really want to give them a gauge because you will deck out. But with this, at least they can get the 5k without adding a gauge, which helps a lot sometimes. But after rereading 2 of the skills, you should know that this card is not a perfect card for first ride, because you need your opponents to be on grade 3. If you are going first, the first skill is basically not going to help you at all. So if you're going first, this is probably your second ride. If you're going second, then this card can be your first ride, but because you're retiring 5, you do need to have units that can help you rebuild the board. At the same time, you need to have some backup plan, because this card is not going to generate you any more units. We do have cards to help generate the field, but it's kind of before the ride and during the battle phase. And this first skill is also a when attack skill. So you might, if we just look at this card, once we did it once, after that we will need to find our way to rebuild the board and eat them again. So that's kind of heavy. But the restand is great, the plus power is great, the give your comrades 5k power is also great. Now is how we fully utilize all these skills and use them at the right timing. And as a backup plan, I have 2 Gigano Blazer, which this card can be your first ride or your ride after, because he can basically draw you 2 cards and call 2 cards out. So you don't actually need to waste extra hand for calling units, because you're drawing 2, you're calling 2 back. So your hand size didn't change at all. And you can also get to plus 5k to your front row units as long as you have adding 3 or more equipped gauge. So in the early stage, you still have room to actually do that, and there's a lot of unit that helps you to gain the gauge. And this card, when you call 2 units, you can give them a gauge each. So what you need to find is just another way to add 1 more gauge, and then you can activate the skill. So he's a good backup plan, but mainly our focus is riding on Raptor Kernel. So he's good to be here, but it's not a must. But if you're looking to rebuild your board after doing this, when you apply enough pressure that you don't need to restand again, or you really can't restand again, this card is going to help you out. And then next, I am running 3 of the Spino driver. So Spino driver is also a card that will kind of burn your own units quite a lot, but at least you get to draw cards back, you get to get extra XL circle, so you can expand your stuff, and it's basically a very good setup for from going Spino driver to Raptor Kernel, because you ride Raptor Kernel on top of Spino driver, then you can create first generate a XL circle from ride and generate another XL circle if you have enough units to retire. You also get to pre-pump your units before attack, so they can at least hit some numbers. Even if you call a triggers down, at least you still get something from there. So yeah, because you still get to call 1 unit from your hand. So even if your hand is so bad, you call a unit, a trigger onto a XL2 circle to pump it to 10k, and then plus 5, you can at least reach 15k. So still not bad, but you do have like situations that you don't have good units to call, but that's not something that we can always control when we are playing like Tachikaze. When we are like calling from gauge, we defend with good cards sometimes because we want to save some shield, but then we need to think a lot. We really need to think a lot what to guard, look at the board carefully, what you can do next turn, and then use these units to help you build your board, to apply pressure, and then try to create as much XL circle as you can, because more multiple attacks, even when they're small pokes, when your opponents at 5 damage or maybe even 4, can really give them a very, very hard pressure and let them use a lot of cards. Okay, so speaking about Raptor Kernel, of course we do have our Raptor series, firstly from Raptor Captain. So when you ride Raptor Kernel on top of him, you can Soul Blast 1 to call up to 2 grade 2 or lower basically Raptor series from your deck, and then shuffle. So you get to build your board when you ride Raptor Kernel on top of him, but of course if you're doing so, that means you are not going to ride these guys. So this is something that you need to actually pick. You prefer to call 2 of your Raptor series out, or you prefer to do something else? Because if you are going first, yes, of course getting 2 more units out sometimes saves your life, but maybe you prefer the setup. So you do get to choose. So some people might see this kind of setup is a little bit contrasting, but because we can't always control a draw, we are not playing Overdress era, we can't basically secure what we want to ride. We can try to reach there, but we do need different setup, because if you are really going first, even if you get 2 extra units that are Raptors, they might not help you that much, because your Vanguard is basically blank, except with the plus 5k power when your opponent is still grade 2 or lower. So if you ask me, sometimes I would just go for Spino Driver or Gigano Blazer to do the setup first, and then just do some multiple attacks from there, because I can generate cards with equip gauge, or I can turn units into cards, and I can also generate more circles to even draw more cards to survive. Then the next turn I go for Raptor Kernel with enough cards and keep doing little pokes, rebuilding boards, and then eat 5, restand, and do a lot more little pokes until I win. So this is a good card, because he also gets to reborn himself with the second skill, which is if this card got a gauge and is retired by your card effects from Recard Circle, you can so +1 and call this to a anti-circle. So you can reuse this card. And because for cards like Radiodon, which I am running of course 4 of, they can only use once per turn for like bound by name. So you can't use him 2 times to call 2 units. And sometimes you just have a Radiodon inside your gauge and then you call it out to be an attacker, which is still a good thing, but they cannot give you new units. And you need to rely on something, or sometimes you just don't have good units to call, then at least you can use Radiodon to give this card a gauge and retire it somehow, and you can bring it back. So yeah, which is still a very important multiple attacker, and usually your call targets when you ride your Raptor Kernel on top of him to call 2 more out, and then just do some little pokes, or maybe if you are lacking boost, then you can call the great one as well, up to you. And then of course Radiodon for multiple attacks, creating gauges. Basically he uses, he's still just great, so nothing too much we need to talk about, we know what he does. And then Spino extort to generate more draw power, generate more cards on the field, because if you have 2 gauges from Radiodon or Bluespring, you can always call a total of 2 units out and generate 2 more gauges, or even just this, you give this a gauge, and if the gauge is good quality to call out, you can use the extort to pop your captain, call a unit inside the gauge to be attacker, and also reborn your captain, so you can basically do 2 more attacks. So he is a very good multiple attack enabler. The only weak point is if you are facing kind of like a force deck, or a deck that can always defend them so well that you might not hit key numbers with this card, which is one kind of a weak point, but that's something that we can't always control, but we just need to try to set up some good numbers, or at least some numbers that your opponents need to guard for, and then do multiple attacks from there. Okay, so next, going to grade 1s. Basically kind of like the grade 2 setup that I have our Raptor Surgeons and Bluespring. So Bluespring is basically the same as Radiodon, give more gauges, enable more multiple attacks by calling the cards from the gauge, by their own skills, still bound by name once per turn. Raptor Surgeon helps you to look at top 7 to search for a grade 2 or higher Raptor series add to your hand when this card rides on the Vanguard Circle. So it's kind of like the old ride chain that you get to search a upper grade of the Raptor series, which is quite important in Tachikaze, if you ask me, because we do have a good hand, we can have a rushing hand, but we don't always have all our grades. But this card is going to help you kind of increasing the rates of getting what you need. So even if you just go from 1, search a 2, that's already a big step. Meaning you can write whatever you want, and you get, even if you don't want to write this card because you think you will go for these, you can still put it out as a attacker, and you are squeezing your deck down to increase your rate of pulling triggers. As always, that's what we want to see. And this card, when attacks or boost, you can have a unit without gauge to add a gauge. So another way to like enable this card to reborn, give them some early gauges before they use their own skill, because they can then apply the gauges to something else. Then you can also enable extort skill to call something from gauge, so that is really great. And since they kind of activate at a similar timing, so you can use this skill to give something a gauge first and then pop that unit out if you really need to. But usually you don't have to force yourself to do that. Yeah, so still a good card, still a needed card. That's why they are here. And then to conclude, I have 2 of the Laser Resurrects and then 2 of the Savage Shooter. So this card I was running somewhere like 3 to 4, but I cut down to 2 because if you look at my grade ones, you know for sure that when I'm looking at grade ones, this is what I'm going to write, for sure. And then that means I am not likely to going to use her on play skill for Vanguard Circle, even though I can actually call another unit out if I really want to. But yeah, I prefer to have like a search on a higher grades to make sure I get my rights. So what this card is valuable now is more on the second skill, that I can choose what I want to put into a unit as a gauge. That could be a card that enables my multiple attack. That's basically my uses on the 7 shooter, so I'm cutting to 2 because I basically just need to use it like once per turn, and this card need to rest. So yeah, you can't boost, meaning you have less cards to help you extort to boost. So it's kind of a trade-off, but getting good units inside, like recycling these, or even just put your green freeze from drop to the field again to be a good attacker, can be helpful. And Laser Resurrects is just great that you at least can secure an extra hand because you will pop units with Colonel or with Spino Driver, and even this. So you do have a lot of cards that can help you retire, and if you see something really nice that's stored into this, you can just grab them back. So this is the reason why I still think Laser Resurrect is important right here. But if you do prefer something else, feel free to suggest, and I can see how this goes. And then with triggers, it's kind of like crits everywhere. So I have 6 crits, and then 2 fronts, 4 draws, and 4 heals. Now, similar to my other V deck profile, that I still prefer some early rush protection. I might face something similar, like an Exile Clan. I might face a Force Clan that can really use their Force 2 so well that I can't survive before I reach Grade 3. So I still think 4 is great, but if you really prefer the 20k shield, feel free to change it too. That's always a personal preference, and I always switch around between 4 heal guardians or 2-2. So it's really up to you. That's not a fixed number, but choose the one that you prefer. And then 2 fronts is because I don't always go with Raptor kernel, and also at the same time, even when I'm going with Raptor kernel, I can still pop the units that like Regiodon, like Bluespring, to bring out new units, and then my captain that can reborn himself. So front is still having its uses. Pumping the front row for 10k sometimes it's just what you really need to push enough. So I'm still running fronts. Crits is just kind of basic, early game good cards to push, and then 4 PGs that I do kind of wanting to switch 2 of them into the 30k crit, because there are so many matches that I put the draw trigger as a gauge under and I can't take them back. There are chances that that happens because I'm not always having a Laser X on board to allow this to happen. Yeah, so even that, because when you see a 30k shield and when you see a PG, you kind of in your mind prefer every 30k shield gone rather than a PG gone. But talking about just purely attack points, I think draw PGs with 5k is still somehow a little bit better. Somehow. Just somehow. So I'm still running 4 PGs. There are moments that you really rely on PGs, and draw is still quite important, but I can't afford having extra 5k draws in here based on what I test. So I think currently this lineup is great. Again, this one is up to you what you want to switch. This is what I want to keep. This is what I want to keep. This is what I want to keep. Yeah. So the list is here. The tactics is also, like as I said, usually try aim for this. And then grade 2, depending on what you want, you probably would prefer to ride a captain, even though you might not use the skill by riding on top, because you prefer these cards to be on the side, or maybe you want to ride a extort because you still have a Regiodon in hand that can just do some early multiple attacks if you want to. That's also work. Then when you reach grade 3, see if you're going first or second, then you can choose your options, because you usually can draw at least 1 to 2 options in your hand to use. But even if you just have to write this and then bring 2 Raptors out, that isn't bad at all. It's not like the end of your game. You still get to rush your opponents a little bit by doing so, so you still get rewarded. Yeah. So this deck, this lineup, I think is more a way that help you to understand how the Raptor series work, while not complicating things too much, because we do see a lot of different cards, like using the high power units to build a board, or using some great ones to help you move gauges around, secure your gauges, secure your souls and such. There's a lot of things that can happen, but having a more simple lineup, I think, is easier for you to pick up the deck. And things you do is a lot, even with this build, because you do really need to look at your boards a lot more carefully than before. Not saying that you don't have to when we have previous Tachikaze build, but with this build you need to be a lot more cautious, because there might be chances that you think you have a good board, you retire all the good units, and then you retire them too early, and then when you see the same units out and you just pop it again, and like Radiodon and Bluespring, they can't use the effects more than once per turn, and then you wasted it. There are chances like that, and you try not to let that happen. You look at your board carefully, you look at your hand carefully, so that you can make sure what you really want to keep, which card you should attack first, what your opponents have, how many cards in their hand, how are you going to take their cards per attack, or at least taking multiple cards from one attack, like a Vanguard attack, so that they lose a lot of stuff while you're also losing stuff, but you're making them losing more than you. If not, if they have too many cards in their hand, then it will be a nightmare for you. But so far this deck is quite fun. I like it a lot because it's also my favorite unit, and it's, to me, the star is not only the grade 3 but also the grade 1, because I get to have a chance to search. Even I don't get to search the right one all the time, or maybe sometimes I don't even search a thing, but at least I have the chance, which really makes the game flow like a lot easier, and you don't need to worry too much and just go for what you want to do. Yeah, so that's it for this deck profile. Do comments down below, let me know your thoughts on this. Maybe there's other cards that you're actually running that you think is great. Feel free to let me know. Yeah, and just hopefully I can get some fight videos for this deck early enough, because I do have the Chinese New Year holiday. As long as I get to do some recordings, then I can have my time to actually edit them and post them out. And of course, there will be more and more V Clan collection deck profiles coming out, because I do have multiple clans that I play. So I just need to find time to test them out, and then I can push it out to you guys. Yeah. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Signing off.